Hello my friends and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a special one as I'm celebrating passing the 100 sub mark on YouTube. I want to thank everyone that was involved in my Twitter poll that decided the topic of this video, and I'm very grateful that you all chose the history of my love for Nintendo, as I was kind of banking on that one, was really hoping for that one. So let's just get right into it. Let's rewind back a long time to when I was about 5 years old. My brother at the time was a huge gamer, and he was about 8 years older than me, so I always had access to some really great games. The first games I remember playing on the original Nintendo were Konami's Contra, Tecmo's Ninja Gaiden, Capcom's Rescue Rangers, and of course, the majestic, the beautiful Mario Bros. With Duck Hunt. I was so fascinated by video games from the very start because, in a way, it was like I was playing my cartoons. There was just nothing like it. But at this time, I didn't distinguish between Nintendo and other companies. I was too young to understand the elements of the industry, and this will be quite apparent in these earlier years, building up to the end of the video. I had an incredible time with the original Nintendo and spent a lot of great moments having fun with my brother, but he slowly grew out of video games, and eventually it was just me. One fateful day, a dear friend of mine invited me over, and lo and behold, there was a new and majestic looking device sitting next to his TV, and the Nintendo Entertainment System I knew was nowhere to be found. I was quick to ask, what is it, and if we could play it? It was the Super Nintendo, and boy was it super. He showed me his meager but impressive collection of games, including Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario World. Those are the only two I really remember, and honestly I'm sure those were the only two that truly mattered. He powered it on, and from the moment I heard the coin jingle when the Nintendo sign popped up, I knew that this was going to be a very special gaming system. I also knew that I had to have one. But alas, I would not receive a Super Nintendo until 2004, in a trade with the same friend. If you want to know what I traded, 2 PlayStation games and $40, which doesn't necessarily constitute a full trade, but I found that I made out much better, because I got an incredible list of games along with the system. But for those years before I obtained a SNES of my own, I experienced a lot of greatness on the system, including the first 3D I had ever seen with the original Star Fox. Even though I knew I wanted one, by a stroke of odd luck, my stepmother's brother convinced my dad to get me a Sega Genesis. This was a defining moment because I fell head over heels for the system. For starters, the branding of Sega was unlike anything I had seen before, with its beautiful shiny logo and the way each game tackled the logo intro. But the games were what caught me. Not that they were better or worse, I just loved the difference in style between Sega and Nintendo. In that same year when I got the Sega Genesis, I also received my first Game Boy, which I carried around like it was a lifeline. Having superb games at my disposal whenever I wanted to play was a game changer. At this time I had a lot of friends that were on one side or the other, but I felt completely comfortable in the middle. Even with having a Sega Genesis, I found myself going to friends' houses that had Super Nintendo to play the different games that were coming out on the system because I just didn't want to miss out. Then 1994 rolled around, and one of the greatest fighting games I have ever played came out. Rareware had just released Killer Instinct, and it blew my and all my friends' minds. So me not really understanding exclusivity, asked for it for Christmas on the Sega Genesis. Obviously, I didn't get it, so I was a little bummed out, but my mother was really great at finding a way. So instead, I got it on my Game Boy, and I was incredibly happy with it. In this period, I was getting heavy into magazines like GamePro and Nintendo Power, with electronic gaming to come later on. But this is how I stayed in the loop, because at the time, the internet was only just popping up in the Bahamas. I started seeing flickers of a new console by Sega called the Saturn, and Sony was working on some little system, but I paid Sony no mind, which was a huge mistake looking back. And Christmas of 1996, I asked for that Saturn, and did not get it because I was told it was incredibly expensive. Nights into Dreams had just come out, and I was fascinated by how it looked and how it played. But this was an act of a higher power because the summer after, I went on vacation with the family and I was given some spending money. Because it had just been my birthday, I had quite a bit of spending money to work with. So I pooled that all together and I was able to get a Nintendo 64 with 2 games. I had quite a few to choose from, but I narrowed it down to Mario Kart 64, an absolute must, and Blast Corps, which was an incredibly interesting and different Rareware game. Later on in the trip, my grandfather gave me some additional money, told me not to tell my mom, and I was able to get one more game. He was always spoiling us kids, which I'll always be grateful for. This is a trip that I will never forget. I had never in all my life been so blown away. As I stood in front of the showcase and felt out my options, the choices in my mind were Killer Instinct Gold or Turok. Both great games, but at the time I didn't know what Turok was exactly. I just knew from the back of the box art it looked really cool. But I knew in my heart that I was going to like Killer Instinct Gold because of my love for the original Killer Instinct. And plus I wanted to take it home to that friend and show him the new Killer Instinct. I was happier than a pig in feces, some might say, with the game, but then I started to see commercials of Turok and realized I had made an incredibly grave mistake. So once again, I relied on Christmas to add it to my list, and it was at the very tip top of that list along with Wave Race 64, Star Fox 64, and GoldenEye. Turok was a great game and blew me away in a lot of ways, but those 3 other games were legendary. I would say again that this is one of those defining moments. This was when I started to notice what made a great game, and Nintendo, in my opinion, was ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. Years went on and great games continued to come out for the PlayStation and Nintendo. Sega Saturn didn't last very long, but then Sega answered back with a roundhouse kick to the beanbag of both Nintendo and Sony with the beautiful, the powerful, the tasty Dreamcast. I had seen it in person before, but only the odd little console itself. But it wasn't until Christmas of '99 that I would finally bear witness to its magnificence. Another good friend of mine would call me in the afternoon every year so we could talk about the gifts that we got, but this year was a little different. He called about an hour after we finished breakfast, so our presents had only just been opened. And I was in the beginning stages of playing the game I got for Christmas, which was Resident Evil 2 for 64. So really, I thought nothing could touch me. I picked up the phone, and before I could even say a word, he was like, "Dude, come over. I have the best zombie game ever." To which I replied, "No, sir. I have the best zombie game ever. Resident Evil 2, buddy." He said, "Trust me." So without missing a beat, I asked my mom if I could go by his house, and I was off to see this unknown game. I stepped into his room to find him shooting at the screen with a mammoth handgun. The game was House of the Dead 2, which is still, to this day, my favorite rail shooter. Its gore, flow, and arcade style had me spellbound. I couldn't help but think that this was it. Graphics couldn't possibly get any better than this. After playing for half an hour or so, I expressed this to him. He looked at me, took out another game that I wasn't really familiar with, and proceeded to blow my brains out the back of my head with Soul Calibur. I still consider this game my top 5 favorite fighting games of all time. Needless to say, I was sold back on Sega. This was short-lived as the release of PS2 and bad management would drive Sega to become a third-party company. But those few years that the Dreamcast was available and making games were some of the best experiences in my memory. Shenmue changed my life. It was absolutely incredible. I remember this moment because my mother had just come back from a trip and informed me that the Dreamcast had been discontinued. She was told this by a Best Buy employee. And at 16, I was like, that dude's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I couldn't believe it until I saw it in Electronic Gaming Monthly. This was a pivotal changing point for me and my love for Nintendo because these once invincible companies were showing their mortality. Sega's departure from first party left such a huge hole in me that this was when I started focusing my love and energy into Nintendo. And it wasn't the last time I'd feel the keen sting of great loss. Later that year, Nintendo released the GameCube. That Christmas, my mother surprised me with the Indigo lunchbox and 3 legendary games. First I opened Wave Race Blue Storm, which I loved. Next, Luigi's Mansion, which I instantly fell head over heels for. It was an incredibly impressive game, but the atmosphere and gameplay were what grabbed me. The particle effects, lighting, and character models were unlike anything I had ever seen come out of Nintendo, and it helped to set a bar pretty high. I didn't think anything could get much better on the system. And then I opened my third game, which happens to be still one of my favorite games of all time. Star Wars Rogue Leader. I had no real idea of what I was getting into or what to expect from the games. I had seen pictures, but they did the game no justice. I was so intrigued that I didn't play much of the other games before I became obsessed with the idea of playing Rogue Leader. The other games were beautiful, especially Luigi's Mansion, but Rogue Leader was a true show of the GameCube's incredible and understated power. The sound, the lighting, the gameplay, and the attention to the original movies was incredible. Not very long after its release, Nintendo would put fans through one of our greatest losses: the sale of Rareware to Microsoft. This was a clear sign that Nintendo was not in a good place, so I became increasingly anxious that they were going to follow in the footsteps of Sega with the Dreamcast. I also became more involved in my own way when it came to Nintendo's well-being. This was when I realized that my love for Nintendo went beyond just playing games. I found myself following more of the business side of things, but at the same time I was getting into the early stages of concept creation and improving the current IPs of Nintendo. So I started thinking about schools to get into that would help me to achieve this goal. Long story short, I got into a very promising school, but had many issues I wasn't able to overcome. That's a story for another day. So I went back to the Bahamas very defeated, and it really didn't help that I had a family that wasn't truly behind my dream. I got a job working for a powerboat that took people to arguably one of the most beautiful places on Earth. And this was where my imagination really started to bloom. Not only from the nature that I was surrounded by every day, but from the emotions attached to my quest. It was a very scary, sad, and beautiful time for me. During this period, Nintendo announced and released its then new DS brand. I watched it struggle for the first few months, but from the moment I got it, I was rattling ideas of what it could be or what it could achieve. It was truly revolutionary, and once Nintendo created Kirby's Canvas Curse, the system launched to incredible heights. This was the system that sparked the Nintendo salesman in me. I found myself in friends' circles, game stores, and while traveling, spreading Nintendo's message. I convinced many people that Nintendo was the right decision for a gaming experience. Nintendo at this point was about to reveal one of the most revolutionary jumps in gaming. First, by showing one of the weirdest controller designs many had ever seen. Little did I know it would stand to change the face of gaming as we knew it. The Wii was born. I continued to spread the word with the Wii slaying sales charts. While this was going on, YouTube was born. I had no idea what this platform was going to be capable of, but with my desire to review and talk about games, it became a focus in the years to come. The Wii finished out with a struggle leading into the Wii U, while the DS transitioned into the revolutionary 3DS that started with a 6-month struggle. The 3DS went on to be one of the most successful systems, while the Wii U went on to be a flop despite producing some of Nintendo's best games, and some of the best games of the generation. From the very beginning, before the system even released, I had been thinking of game concepts and marketing plans to help the Wii U jumpstart its momentum, so it didn't suffer a similar struggle that the 3DS had. It wasn't until much later that I realized that the Wii U was not capable of my creations. Myself and many others still had a great time with the system, but its lack of success and Nintendo's hemorrhaging money due to its lack of success really started to get to me. I found myself once again being worried of the same fate as the Dreamcast, and I lost sleep and even wept over the company's well-being. I wanted so bad to improve their situation, and I knew I had the ideas. If I had been given the chance, I would have given them happily for free. I wanted so bad for them to just be successful, to be the best company they could possibly be, but I had no idea how to accomplish this. Before the Wii U launched, I met my now brother-in-law. He was and still is a huge gamer and an adamant Nintendo fan like myself, so we got along like two peas in a pod. I was 25 and he was 12 when we got the Wii U. We both fell in love with the system whilst acknowledging its issues, like its slow OS and load times, which were later fixed with a firmware update. Soon after this, he introduced me to capture cards, which opened up the doors for the prospect of talking about video games in my own production. I felt alive at this idea because in the late 90s, early 2000s, when extended play with Adam Sessler was still a thing, I had wanted so badly to be his co-host, but now I could have my own extended play. I now had the creative outlet I was looking for, the ability to broadcast that love for Nintendo out into the world. And though it's taken me many years and trials to get here, I'm here now, and I'm here to stay. If you're sitting there asking yourself why I sound so connected to Nintendo, it's because no gaming company has been there for me more. They honestly helped me through some truly tough times. Obviously they don't know this, but I wish to give back to them as a company and by extension the fans. I am a fan and I'm proud of it, but that's not to say that I don't love and respect other games and consoles. Nintendo just happens to be my bread and butter, and I can see their almost limitless potential. I hope to help them become the best that they can be one day. Not the best in the industry, but if that's where my input takes them, I'll be all the happier. The Switch has been out for a while now, and it's doing well, but the system has some really sharp weaknesses that I hope will be addressed in next year's model update, but we shall see. Regardless, the core concept and the games coming out are impressive and are really what make a great system. Hey, what's up guys? Before I close out the video, I just wanted to give a bit more of a personal thank you to everyone that's been supporting me on Twitter, on YouTube, on Discord. You guys are amazing. I can't thank you enough. For a long time, I was getting ready to just stop doing YouTube completely because it's been hard, trying to figure out how to get myself out there, how to find the algorithm and become successful on YouTube. And by extension with things like Twitch, I haven't yet started streaming because for a long time I was just so unconfident that the idea of being in front of a camera like this would completely shut me down. Even it took me a while to get over talking in front of a mic. So just with all the overwhelming support, it's been life-changing. I'm almost like ready to tear up now. It's like so epic, and I can't thank you guys enough. Now, that being said, you're probably noticing I have a pumpkin. I should have lit this candle, and I'm sorry. I should have lit it for effect. But I have this pumpkin here that a couple weeks ago, around the same time that I did the poll of what this particular video was going to be about, I also did a poll knowing that it's Halloween and I'm epic at carving pumpkins of what pumpkin to carve. So I finally got the pumpkin, and that video should be up tomorrow or maybe Wednesday, which would be most appropriate because it's Halloween on Wednesday. But the poll turned out that you guys wanted me to do Jack Skellington, which is something I'm very familiar with. I've done it maybe twice before over the last 10 years. But hopefully if I can get another pumpkin, I really want to try to accomplish a Samus Aran pumpkin. I think that would look amazing. And I've seen concepts of that. I saw them last year. I've been looking at them this year just in case I can get another pumpkin. But yeah, look forward to that video on Wednesday. Again, guys, thank you so much. I can't express the love I have in my heart for you guys. It really does mean so much. And I will see you in the next video.